Hi there. So when we talked about equivalent exposures, we made the assumption, and hopefully this will generally be the case, but we made the assumption that our light meter was telling us the truth, that it wasn't being fooled. We just didn't want to use the specific combination of numbers that it was giving us. But there will be cases when your light meter will be fooled, that it will give you a light meter reading that will not, in fact, give you a properly exposed image. And so there are certain lighting situations that you will encounter when this will often be the case. So if you look at my notes here, I've given four situations in which you might not want to do what your light meter says is correct. And the first is when you have a dark subject against a light background. And so let's say you're photographing someone standing in front of a brightly lit window, a backlit window or a door. The light meter, although it takes the darker person in the center into account, senses all this brightness coming from behind, and it says, it's too bright. You need to let in less light. And it will give you a light meter reading that will expose correctly for the highlights, that is the bright area behind your subject, but in so doing will throw your subject into shadow. So in order to expose correctly for the highlights, you'll let less light in, and so your darker areas will become even darker. So what can you do? First of all, if you don't want that effect, you can move your subject so that your subject is not in front of this brightly lit area, which is more difficult to meter for properly. If you do want that effect, then you need to decide which area you want exposed properly. Do you want to have your subject in silhouette and have the background, the bright background, exposed correctly? Or do you want to expose correctly for your subject, which will throw the background into even greater brightness? So if you expose correctly for the shadows, you'll let more light in, and that will make the bright area even brighter. What you need to do is go up to your subject and take a meter reading just off of the subject and not including the background into your frame. So you go up to your subject and meter just off of the head or face or whatever without including the background, and then back up and use that light meter reading, even though when you back up, the light meter will then say, you're letting in too much light. But you'll do it anyway. And so in order to do that, you'll probably want to be in the manual setting so that you can purposely over or underexpose. You can also do that by using the exposure compensation button, which is that little plus minus button on the computer, and that will allow you to purposely over or underexpose. Okay. The second situation is the reverse of dark on light, and it's light on dark. So a light subject against a dark background. So maybe a person sitting in a darkened room that only has one light source from above or from the side. In this case, the light meter will sense all this darkness and say, it's too dark, you need to let more light in. And so by doing that, the camera will make the background expose correctly, so lightening the background, but then your subject will become too bright. And so you'll do the same thing. You'll go up to the subject and take a meter reading just of the subject, and then back up and use that meter reading, even though the camera will then say, it's too dark, you need to let more light in. Okay. The third situation is when you have a light subject against a light background. So, for example, if you have a white dog and you go up to the Sierra in the winter in the snow, and you want to photograph your white dog in the snow with nothing else in the frame. In this case, the light meter will sense all this brightness and will want to underexpose. So the light meter reads the world in what's called medium gray or middle gray, 18% gray, zone 5. So whatever you point the meter at, the light meter will give you a meter reading to render that area gray. And in the normal course of things, that's fine. But when you have everything one tone, you may not want it to be gray, as with this example, a white dog in snow. And so in the past, you just had to know that this would happen, that the light meter would say, it's too bright, and underexpose. So you would purposely overexpose, which is what you may still have to do, but because we now have digital cameras, we get instant feedback. So that's really nice. So just take a photograph and see what it looks like and adjust accordingly. But generally speaking, with very light subjects, white dogs, snow, white t-shirts, you'll probably need to let in a little more light than you think. Okay. The reverse of that is having a dark subject against a dark background. So my hair may be against a black or dark gray t-shirt. And the light meter in this case would say, oh, it's too dark. You need to let in more light. And it would make my hair and my dark t-shirt gray instead of black, or what's called textured black. So you can still see the strands of hair and not have a black hole. But in this case, the camera would want to overexpose, and so you would know that you need to underexpose to render these tonal values as they are, not as the camera necessarily thinks that they should be. Okay.